In this video, we are going to be going through how to create a character in Baldur's Gate 3 and not have it suck. Now, before I get started, this is going to be quite a long video, so I will be doing chapters. So if you want to watch this over a period of time, then you're going to be able to get to an end of a chapter and come back to it later on. So there's going to be several things that I cover in this video. Those things are going to be what the game is based on, rules, play styles. I'm going to talk about where you can get some free resources as well, concepts that are fundamental to this game and to Dungeons and Dragons or D&D. And I'll come on to that in a second. I'm going to go through different attributes, their overarching factors and how they interact with skills. I'm going to then run through the races, classes, and I'm going to do a dummy run of how to create a Barbarian and, the other end of the spectrum, a Wizard. So there's going to be chapters. If you want to just skip to whatever sounds relevant to you, then by all means feel free to do so. So what is Baldur's Gate 3? Well, Baldur's Gate 3 is based on the tabletop role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to call it D&D moving forward because it's much easier saying Dungeons and Dragons, especially because I seem to have a bit of a tongue tied today and it's just like blah, blah. So anyway, it is a almost perfect video game adaptation of that tabletop experience. You get to create a random character or pick one of the pre-generated ones that you can see here and play it through a scenario that is, or a storyline that is being given to us. So in this game, the video game is our dungeon master, but on the tabletop version you'll have another player that has created the world, created the scenarios, the storylines, and you are playing through that storyline. So there are many rules around D&D. There's many rules that are fundamental in what you can do, how you can do things, and how the game mechanics work in general. Now this has been translated over to this game, into Baldur's Gate 3. So we're going to be touching on some of those core concepts, as I mentioned earlier, and we're going to be running through those in what I feel are fundamentals in more detail. So if you wanted to get some free resources, there's two that I would thoroughly recommend. One of those is dndbeyond.com. It is created by Wizards of the Coast, which are the people that own the D&D or own Dungeons and Dragons, and they're producing content for D&D all of the time. Now if you head over to D&D Beyond, you can create a free account and you'll be able to play around with their free rules that they have available to you over there, create characters and bits and pieces like that. So that's just something to be aware of, and is a really good free tool and resource. Now you might also be able to find, if you're struggling in game with a particular type of monster, if you go over to D&D Beyond, you're going to be able to find a profile on that monster, in which case you're going to be able to go, okay, so this monster isn't dying because I'm hitting it with the wrong type of magic. It might be that it's resistant to fire damage and you need to be hitting it with cold damage or something like that. So there's lots of little free tricks and tips that you can get from D&D Beyond if you're struggling in game with a certain aspect. The other free resource is a group of voice actors called Critical Role. Now these guys are immensely funny. They've been going for a number of years. They're on their third campaign. So if you wanted some inspiration or to see how some voice actors play D&D and how it plays in general, then by all means do go over and check out their YouTube channel and just watch those videos. They're, as I said, they're currently on campaign 3. The production value has just gone through the roof since campaign 2. They did do their first campaign, which was through a different medium, through a different sort of like YouTube channel, but since they've broken off on their own, they've just blown up and they're doing extremely well. So do by all means go over and check those out on YouTube as well. Disclaimer with that though, if you do go and watch D&D and you do go watch Critical Role, just be aware not every group is exactly like Critical Role. They have been friends for a long time. They're professional voice actors. So if you sort of like watch Critical Role and you go, that looks really good fun, I want to go join a local club or a local group, you might not have the same experience. It's all about doing it with people that you're friendly with. I do recommend going and join a local club. Just be aware that excuse me, just be aware that you might not be able to take that full experience and pull it into a local setting, because not everyone's going to be a professional voice, which they are, and they're all immensely fun. And you'll have loads of fun on D&D. I'm not trying to put you off, but just be aware, managing those expectations. So let's go on to the different play styles that you can expect. Luckily in D&D you can pretty much create whatever it is that you want, and that translates, as I've said, over to Baldur's Gate 3. So if you like to play that really beefy, tanky warrior that runs up into the front lines and just smashes stuff until they stop moving, you can do that. If you wanted to play the sneaky person that jumps out of the shadows and stabs them in the kidneys, you can also do that. If you wanted to play the wizard that's standing in a different area code or postcode and launching spells while reading a book and drinking a cup of tea, that's also something you're going to be able to do. Now let's get into the core concepts that I feel are fundamental to D&D and, as a result, this game. So those concepts are DCs, D20s and dice throws, saving throws, ability checks, success and failures, advantages and disadvantages. So already, if you're not familiar with some of those terms, don't worry, I'm going to cover them now. But I felt myself going a little bit like, what are you talking about? So it can be a little bit overwhelming, but that's fine, don't worry, we're going to cover it. So what is a DC? So a DC is a difficulty check or a difficulty class. It's effectively a value, generally between 1 and 20. It can sometimes be over 20, but between 1 and 20, that determines how difficult it is to complete said task. So for example, you might be trying to persuade someone to hand over all their money. Now that DC might be a 15, in which case when you throw a dice, and we'll get onto that in a second, you need to score above a 15, and then they give you all the money. If you score under a 15, then they won't. It's just a way of determining how difficult a thing is. Now, if you have a character that is very charismatic and is good at talking to people, that DC might be easier for you to achieve because you've got modifiers and bonuses you can put on top of whatever it is that you roll. But we'll get into that when we talk about skills and attributes and stuff. So what is it that you're rolling? Well, that's what we call a D20. So a D20 is a 20-sided dice. So if you was to roll a D20, you're generally going to get between 1 and 20. And I say generally, if you get anything outside of those parameters, I'll be really impressed because it's a 20-sided dice. But so you would throw a dice. So using our example from earlier, if you wanted to succeed in that persuading that person at a DC 15, you would roll your D20 and you would want to get 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You got anything lower than 15, that's a fail. Anything equal to or higher is a pass. Generally speaking, when you want to throw a dice, you want to get a higher value. That translates to damage and attacks and that sort of good stuff. So there aren't just D20s in the game. You may also have a D4, which is carrying on with that example, a 4-sided dice, or a D6, which most people are familiar with, 6-sided dice, D8s, 8-sided, D10s, 10-sided, and D12, 12-sided. Now, depending on what class you are, what weapon you're using, or what spell you're using, you may have a damage dice that is equal to one of those lower values than 20. So generally speaking, when you're doing ability checks or you're attacking, it's going to be a D20 sort of throw, and then determining the damage or other buffs or negatives, spells that might come into effect, they're going to be anything D4 and a D12. But it's all the same concept. Whatever you roll, generally you want higher equals better. So the other concept that I want to talk about is saving throws. So again, similar sort of concept. If someone is throwing a spell at you, for example, you've got the chance to potentially roll out of the way. But in order to do so, you must throw a dice for your saving throw. Again, it's like a DC, but it's for you. So someone's thrown a spell at you, you need to roll out the way. So we would say in D&D that you need to roll dexterity saving throw. But again, don't worry about the dexterity word, we're coming on to attributes later. So you would throw a dice, and determining on how easy it would be to roll away, you would need to score equal to or higher again, and then roll out of the way. That's saving throw. Ability checks is something else that uses this DC and D20s. So if you were going to be investigating a room, you walk into a room and you want to look for traps or something like that, maybe you're looking for a particular item, you'd walk into a room, maybe do a perception check, or you would do an investigation check. And that again is rolling the D20, and then you might get modifiers if you're good at that or not, and you would want to get equal to or higher the DC for succeeding on the roll. And that's with ability checks as well. So it works for persuasion, investigation, maybe you're trying to grapple somebody, that might be some sort of athletics check or something along those lines. Checks are something, and DCs and the D20s are a really fundamental part of this game, which is why I'm really trying to hammer home this whole concept of, if you want to do a thing that might be outside of just moving, then there might be a check associated, in which case there's rolls associated, in which case the attributes and skills come into their own, which we're going to get onto. So if you roll a D20, you have two numbers which have significant value. As you can probably imagine, it is the roll of a 20, which is the highest you can get on that roll, what we call a nat 20 or a natural 20, which will give you a critical success. So if you are attacking somebody, that's what we call a critical, and your dice are doubled. Similarly, if you roll a 1, that's what we call a natural 1, and that's bad. 9 times out of 10, that's bad. Now, some DMs might throw an extra bit of funny flavour or spice or trouble into the mix if you roll in that one. For example, I've been in a game where someone was shooting at somebody with a bow and arrow. They rolled a nat 1 and their string broke. They had to take a turn to restring their bow. There's also other, like 9 times in Baldur's Gate, I don't think you need to worry about that. I've not come across a situation where nat 1 has caused me extra trouble. Natural 20s are always good fun because you get to do extra stuff. So keep an eye out. The only time, and we'll get onto this with races, that you get out of a natural 1, because natural 1 is an automatic fail. Doesn't matter what your modifier is, it's a fail. The only time you can get out of that is if you have a feat or you are part of the halfling race. They get to roll natural 1s. Lucky. Brilliant. So that's always that we'll get onto races in a second. So that is your success and failures. Also have another aspect of the game, which is what we call advantages and disadvantages. So advantages are when you get to roll 2 d20s. So if you are in a situation where the odds are in your favour, you might have advantage. That might be something that maybe you are really good at a particular type of skill, in which case you might get advantage when you're rolling those dice. Or, for example, something that is quite common, if you are an elf or you're a particular race, you might have advantage on a particular type of saving throw, in which case you would get 2 d20s to roll for that. And then you would roll those d20s and you would take the highest out of the 2, and that would be your advantage. Disadvantages, as you can imagine, is the opposite. So you would roll 2 d20s still, but you would take the lowest. So that might be if you are, for example, using a weapon that you're not proficient in, or you're using some armor that you're not proficient in. We get onto proficiencies later as well. All right. You might have disadvantage with stealth checks, for example. Or if you're wearing a really heavy armor, you might have a disadvantage with stealth checks. So that's just some bits and pieces about the core concepts that I feel as though are really important to know for playing, this game and D&D. But now that we've got that basic understanding, let's get into attributes. Okay, so moving on, now that we've got the concepts down, let's have a look at the attributes. So you've got 6 attributes. You have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Now, I'll read through these definitions and we'll talk a little bit about proficiency afterwards. So, strength, your muscles and physical power affects your effectiveness with melee weapons. Also determines how far you can jump and how much you can carry. Dexterity, agility, reflexes, and balance affects your effectiveness with range and finesse weapons, and also your initiative and armor class. Constitution, stamina, and physical endurance affects your hit point maximum. That was coming. Memory and mental power improves your spell casting for wizards. Senses and intuition improves spell casting for clerics, druids, and rangers. Then your charisma, force of personality improves spell casting for bards, paladins, sorcerers, warlocks, and influences traders' prices. Now, each of these are what we call your primary attributes. So, depending on what sort of class you want to be, you will have a primary ability. So as you can see, you have a star here. This is for the Barbarian. If we was to go over to Sorcerer, then it will probably switch over to Charisma. Here we go. You can see that Charisma has now changed. So you will have a primary ability, which is what your class is effectively based around. It's normally a good idea to have a higher number in your primary ability, whatever that is. Let's just click back over here. So what you'll also see as we're talking about the screen, we might as well go through, there's some other bits and pieces. So initiative, this is based off of your dex, as we said. So the higher your initiative, that means when you go into combat, you roll a d20 and then you get plus this number, and that determines the turn order of combat. So this is a turn-based game, only in combat. Outside of combat, it's you can click and run around, it's real time. And then health, which is determined by constitution. Cantrips, we'll get onto that a bit later. Spells, we'll get onto that a bit later. Proficiencies. So determining your race and class, you will get different proficiencies. So proficiencies are effectively a set of sub-skills within the game that you are good with. Now, if you are proficient with something, then you get an extra bonus. Now, this bonus changes depending on how high a level you are. So, for example, we can see here, our proficiency bonus at the moment is +2. So that would mean that anything that we are proficient in, so any of these skills, we would get a +2 in. So that would be, let's take a look at Arcana, for example. So our Arcana has a +1 to intelligence, a +2 to our proficiency. So I would expect Arcana to be +3. Arcana is +3. So there we are. Now we can change these. So each of our skills, we get 2 skills that we're proficient in, and then at level 1, and then as we level up, we get feats and bits which we can change all of. So we could say, actually, I don't want to be proficient in Arcana. I want extra proficient in intimidation, a talking skill, deception, lying to people, whatever that might be. So that's just bits that we change around. So these is effectively, this is showing you what you can do. Why you pick up religion, insight, perception, deception, and persuasion is down to a mixture of the elf, the race, the sub-race potentially, the class, and also the background. So depending on what you select here, so if we change that to Sage, you can see that the available skills change from Arcana, History, from Religion and Insight. So that's just something to be aware of. You will get onto backgrounds in a sec, as when we go through our dummy races and such. So they are our attributes. So we touched on skills, but let's have a look at the skills. So you got all of these different skills. I'm not going to read them all, you can read them. But as you can see, if I hover over athletics here, you will have a parent attribute. So if you know that you want to be a sneaky rogue that is very good at lying to people, you might want to see if you can get deception and maybe stealth as your skills. So you can see here that you have athletics, and then underneath where it says athletics you have the parent attribute, which is strength. So as a sorcerer we've got a low strength, which means we get -1 to all of our strength checks. So athletics is a strength check because that's what the parent attribute is. So if we look at acrobatics, that's a dexterity check. Well, our dexterity is +1. Now if we were proficient in our dex skills, that would be a 3, but we're not, so that's fine. Charisma, fine. So this is a charisma one. So here we can see that we are +5. Now we're +5 because 1, we've got our proficient in there, which is adding the 2. Our charisma is also giving us the plus. See, so that's how that is being calculated. So you've got your +3 from charisma checks, and then you want to select your proficient in deception, so you've now got that +2 bonus here at that deception. So that's our skills. Let's have a look at the races. So you've got all of these different races here. All of these will be available to you on D&D Beyond, apart from potentially the Drow and the Githyanki. So the rule set that you get on D&D Beyond is the basic rules or the player's handbook. You might be able to still access these. I haven't tested personally, but you'll be able to see that whether they're on there or not if you wanted to play around with the classes. So each race has its own racial features. Now all of them will have a base movement speed, which then will be potential things that can increase that movement speed. Most of them are 9 meters per turn, but then the smaller races, I think dwarf is, so dwarf is considered a smaller race, 7.5 meters, gnome is 7.5 meters, and halfling is also 7.5 meters. But that is just something to be aware of. If you, when you start playing, if you've selected the halfling, you notice, well, why the fuck aren't I moving as fast as everyone else? That's why, because you are considered a smaller race. Now, what else do you get as a racial feature? There you go. I told you I was getting tongue-tied. So here we've got elven weapon training. So you have proficiency with the longsword, short sword, short bow, and longbow. So we can see here are our weapon proficiencies. Long swords, short swords, long bows, and short bows. Dark vision, you can see in the dark up to 12 meters. Now, I think only 2 races don't have dark vision. That is the Dragonborn and the human. Everyone else has dark vision. Drow has dark vision up to 24 meters, and I think Deep Gnome as well, which is a sub race, which we'll get onto again in a second, has further dark vision. What is dark vision? Dark vision is when it's pitch black, you will be able to see up to 12 meters. You do get light spells, so if you wanted to cast some light, that's always a good thing. But just be aware, if you go into like a cavern and your visibility lowers, that's why. We also have Fey Ancestry. So as I was saying, some races have saving throws or advantage on saving throws against certain things. So Fey Ancestries, for example, you get advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't put you to sleep. Which is a good thing if there's something in the game which is trying to charm you. Something to be aware of. So tieflings, same again, movement, dark vision, and hellish resistance. So you've got resistance to fire damage, and you take half damage from it. So exactly what that says, resistance, you take half damage from that, whatever it is. So barbarians, they get resistance to mundane weapons, so slashing damage, bludgeoning, and piercing damage. When they enter their rage state, and we'll get onto that when we talk about our dummy barbarian I would create. So you have different resistances for different damage types. You also, on the flip side, have vulnerabilities. So if you have a vulnerability, you would take double damage, half the damage again. I can't remember which one it is, but just be aware that there's generally always an opposite to an effect. So here we've got Drow, Drow weapon training, slightly different proficiencies in the weapons. superior dark vision, and fey ancestry. Again, humans, different weapon proficiency, but also armor proficiency as well. So by being human, you have light armor proficiency and shield proficiency. Tongue tie. Humans also get an extra skill to be proficient in, which is pretty cool, and your carrying capacity is increased by a quarter, which is also pretty cool. Halflings. They're brave, so save advantage against saving throws against being frightened, and also lucky. Remember when I said about the natural ones? If you roll a 1 for an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you re-roll the dice, but you must select that. So if you roll a natural 1 again, the dice gods have determined that you are a natural 1 for that roll. But I have got tips that can maybe navigate that. So that's in a different video, but I'll make sure to get that video out before too long. Half elf, fey ancestry again, dark vision, and civil militia again. Dwarves, proficiency in different weapons, dark vision, and also dwarven resilience, which is advantage on saving throws against poison. Githyanki, haha. So Githyanki are a lot more interesting. So Githyanki have ancestral knowledge, which is a proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. So for instance, if you was to do this action and select Dex, all of the skills that had Dex in, so acrobatics, sleight of hand, stealth, you would gain proficiency in all of those. So that would give you an extra +2 to those. Cantrips. So here we go, cantrips. Cantrips are spells. So you get different types of spells. So here you can see you have a spell here, and cantrips are also spells. But you also have what we call spell slots. So a spell slot is any spells above a cantrip level. So cantrips are your basic one. Don't cost any resource to do. You can just do them. You can do them as many times as you like. You could spam cast it or whatever. When you have spells, you get what we call spell slots, which is effectively your best way to describe this. Limitation. You only have a certain amount of energy that you can, or mana. Mana is a common concept. If you can imagine, your spell slots are your mana, so you only allowed to cast X amount of spells based on how many spell slots you have available or how much money you have available. So, for example, you've got 2 level 1 spells. If this Githyanki only has 1 spell slot, you can only cast one of these per long rest. But the cantrips, you can cast as much as you like. And then we have our base movement speed and also martial prodigy, which gives you efficiencies. Gnome. Movement speed, gnome cunning. Advantage on saving throws. The 3 things. That's a pretty strong one. Dragonborn. Now, these guys don't have any extra racial features because all of their racial features are stacked in their subclasses. So we'll go into subclasses in a second. I'll come back to Dragonborn. And then we have Half-Orc, which is savage attacks. When you land a critical hit, your damage dice are tripled instead of doubled. So remember when I said you roll a natural 20 when you hit in, your dice gets doubled. With a Half-Orc, it gets tripled, so you do even more damage. And then Relentless Endurance. When you reach 0 hit points, you gain 1 hit point instead of becoming downed. So when you reach 0 hit points, you become downed. When you're downed, you are still in the turn order, but when it comes around to your turn, you have something called a death saving throw, where you need to score a 10 or higher to succeed. If you score lower, then you fail. If you get 3 fails, your character dies. And then there's a scroll of Revivify that you get at the beginning of the game, which can revive you. If you get 3 successes, your character stabilizes and they don't die. But they are still out of action for the rest of the game. Rest of the turn, sorry. Or combat, or whatever. It is combat, so each combat is broken up into turns. Once you're stabilized, you just stay down and you can't use that character for the rest of that combat. Once that combat's over, you just go up and help them up. And so that's quite a strong one, especially if you're a like fighting up front sort of character. which you'll see later on. I'll get onto the dummy barbarian. Right, so classes. Oh, sub-races, sorry. Let's go back to our Dragonborn sub-race. So, as I said, Dragonborn, you only get base movement speed. That's because a lot of their racial features are stacked in their sub-race. So their sub-race is broken up into colours. So you've got your different colour Dragonborns, and determining what colour you have, you'll have a different breath weapon, which is pretty cool. But also, you will gain a resistance to whatever damage that is. So for example, gold Dragonborns are resistant to fire damage, and they have a fire breath weapon. If we look at the blue Dragonborn, then they are resistant to lightning damage, and they've got a lightning breath weapon. And then you can just go for it. That's pretty cool to be able to get that. That is a once per long rest, I would say, maybe a short rest. I don't know. I've never played a lot of Dragonborn. That's not to say they're bad. They're cool. Look at them. I mean, they're like, yes, fight me. Anyway, moving on. So, classes. As you can see, you got different classes: Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue. Oh, turn them around to face. Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. So, you'll have a playstyle. Feel free to pick whatever you want. Now, I'm going to be going through my dummy Barbarian and my dummy Wizard. How I would build them for to get as much out of them as possible. You can play this however you like. I'm not telling you you have to play it a certain way, but there, as far as I'm concerned, there will be certain races that lean into certain classes more so than others. But there's nothing to say that you can't have like a really strong elf or halfling barbarian. I mean, because you can, 100% you can. There's so many factors in this game that it doesn't matter what you build, you could create a powerful character. But for instance, there's going to be some races that lean into. So, as you can see, you've got your wizards. Now, classes, all your different classes, they're going to have different actions. It's going to give you different abilities. This is where the customization really comes into stuff. So, flurry of blows. You've got key points. Monks run differently to paladins. Paladins run differently to sorcerers. Sorcerers run differently to bards. There's some core concepts. Those core concepts that I spoke about, they all apply to all of these characters. But depending on whether you're a bard, you're going to have spell slots. Wizards, you're going to have more spell slots and spells available to you. And your way of learning spells is all different. So it's worth just sort of like taking a moment to have a look through what it is, what they're doing. And generally speaking, if you have a go-to class or something like that, do that. Play that class. Experiment with that class. Do you like it? You probably will. This is a great game. You then also, later on down the line, get subclasses. So normally around level 2 or level 3, your class will open up even further into an even more in-depth class, where you get extra features that make you even more powerful. So barbarians, for example, one of their main features is rage. They get a subclass later on that alters that rage state and gives you extra bonuses, or it changes sort of bits and pieces about whatever it is that you're doing, how you do it. So let's just have a through. Starting instrument, that's always fun. Bards, singers, that sort of stuff. So as you go through different classes, you'll get different options down here. I'll go through most of these. So just have a quick look through. Rangers, obviously favoured enemies. This will be up to you. Read that. It's all sort of flavour, but it's also something that's important to be able to be like, oh, I want to have this sort of character that does this. Inevitably, your second character is going to be more powerful because you're going to know where you start and the areas that you go in and whatnot. But also, if you want me to create a video for how I would build each of these classes, then just comment the class that you want me to see, that you want me to build below, and we'll go through that. Because that's pretty cool. I like the idea. Okay, so what we'll do now, we will go into me building a barbarian and how I would go about doing that. Okay, so let's have a look. We're going to go back to the beginning. So we are creating a custom origin. This is our barbarian. I'm going to go with half orc. I don't know if you got that impression from me earlier, but we're going to go half orc. Mainly because I like the idea of being up front and not dying maybe quite as much, being able to sort of like have that one hit point to maybe get that last hit in. Dark vision is always a good thing, but also this as well is something that I'm like, yes, I want that. Any one of these races will work barbarian, but I think more so half orc. So let's have a look at our barbarian. So we have this class barbarian, that and that. That was easy. This is one of the easiest things to do. So this is where it comes into more personal preference. However, we're going to go for things that I feel as our best. So I'm going to actually come down to abilities. I'm going to clear abilities. We have our primary stat, which I'm going to put all the points in. Take it up 70. And then going to add loads into constitution and give it the 1 now, which leaves us with 9. Now I know that dex is important to our armor class, so I'm going to put that up to 12. Wisdom is also something I want us to be pretty good at. Charisma, that's alright, but I'm not that bothered about charisma. And intelligence. Now, knowing the game, charisma is a skill that comes up probably more often than anything else. So it might always be worth just having that extra point in charisma so that you're not getting minus modifiers. Because persuading, deception, and other sort of like charisma based checks does come up fairly like a lot. But also combat is a major thing. So I'm doing a lot of strength. I want to have a high health point thing. I'm doing that as high as I can. I'm doing that as high as I can. And I want my armor class to be pretty decent, so I'm putting points into dexterity. I might even drop my wisdom down again and give myself an extra point. Intelligence, we don't give a monkeys about intelligence for barbarian because it's not important. We can possibly rely on the intelligence of other characters. So there we go, we have these. I'm now going to have a look at the skills. So we've got perception is always a good one to have. Intimidation's +2 anyway. That's fine. Athletics is we want athletics, especially as a barbarian. You can do a lot of jumping around, which is a good thing to do. Don't really need to bother about this. Animal handling might be fun. No, that's more important, and I think perception's a pretty good one to have. So we'll keep those there. What I might look at doing though is obviously changing Acolyte to something like Outlander, so it gives us athletics. In which case, if we do that, we can go back and change. That means that we have that there. So because athletics is coming from our background now, we don't need to select that as a proficiency. So it gives us that extra +2 to put somewhere else. So we can keep that in survival. And we can put that now in animal handling. So now we've got even more +2s than we did before. Let's just go and have a look. What does soldier do? Let's have a look here. I think again, because we already had intimidation coming from our race, we don't want to be wasting a skill proficiency on from our background on intimidation. So let's have a look. What else have we got? We know our charisma is basic, not really bothered about that. Wisdom is okay. It could be a good one to go for, actually. That will give us a +2 to our persuasion, and we know that persuasion comes up. We can also then put one of our points in athletics there, and so I mean this might be a pretty decent one to go with. We have +2 for our persuasion, +2 for our intimidation, +2 for our perception. Perception is always good. Animal handling, I haven't found... There's only been one situation that I've needed this skill. So there's that. But athletics comes up for me quite a lot. I quite like that loadout. I think we're going to possibly stick with artisan. Let's have a look. What else do we have? Animal survival handling. Don't want those. Don't need history. No. No. Charlatan. No. Acolyte. No. Sage. No. Urchin. No. So I think it's either going to be... I think... Insight plus... I mean, that can be pretty good. I think this might be our loadout here. So there we go. I'm going to confirm. There you go. And then the only thing that I haven't covered in this guide is the choice of your customization. It's entirely up to you. Something I don't like is the limited amount of voices. There's no orc for it, as far as I'm concerned. Who knows what an orc sounds like, but there's no like really like gruff. I'm gonna kill you. Anything like that. There's none of that. Which is disappointing, because that would be a go-to voice, I think, for an orc. Probably a dragonborn as well to a certain extent, but you play how you want. There we go. Yeah, so I think that is it. That's our barbarian done. Okay, so let's now look at our wizard. So my choice of wizard is a gnome. I really like this advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. I'm also going to stick with rock gnome because they add twice your proficiency bonus to history checks, which is an intelligence based check. I'm changing this to wizard. So here we've got our cantrips and our spells. Our arcane recovery, which is replenish spell slots while out of combat. You cannot restore spell slots above 5th level. And then class feature, level 1 spell slots unlocked. So we're going to go to cantrips. I always recommend 100% having a damaging cantrip. If you don't, you have to go and hit shit. If you have damaging spells, which you will have damaging spells, but if you have damaging spells and you run out of spell slots, you then have to rely on your dex or your strength to do any damage, which you don't want to do. So always make sure you have one damaging cantrip. Now it can be any of these. There's loads of damaging cantrips. So you got firebolt, poison spray, whatever your fancy is. If you want to lean into fire, frost, whatever sort of damage, you can. So always have at least one. You can have more than one, just to change it up occasionally. That's up to you. But something like, for example, 1d10 damage, that's just fire damage. You might want bone chill. The bone chill prevent the target from healing until their next turn. An undead target creature receives disadvantage on attack rolls. Like, I mean, that's pretty good. Acid splash, again, any of these will be fine. Have a look at what else you might get for it. Reduced movement speed, that could be really helpful. All of these are pretty good. You also have 2 light spells. So you've got Dancing Lights, which is a good spell. I use this one all the time. I use this a lot because even though you have dark vision, it's not proper vision. Not like it's daylight. So if you can put the dancing lights out, you could see a lot more, and then you just run around and turn all the candles on. That's a pretty good one. The other one is just personal choice, really. Light, I haven't used light yet because I use dancing lights all the time, but light might be good. Might try that. Might be worth. I'd have one of those. I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about having both, but have one of those. And then the other one is kind of personal choice, really. Like, you can have Blade Ward, taking half damage from bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing attacks. That would be really good, especially for someone that's going to be quite weak. Having something like that is a good defensive spell. That's a cantrip, so that's a good thing to have. Moving on to our spells. So as I mentioned, you get different spell slots. At level 1, you've only got a spell slot of 1. As you level up, the other thing with wizards as well, you'll come across scrolls. You can pay gold to put scrolls into your spellbook, and then that gives you access to those spells. So these spells are the spells that we know, but you can only have a certain number of prepared spells. So for example, if I go back to here, you can see that these 6 are our known spells. So if you was to then write a scroll into your spellbook, that one would also show up. And then as you level up, you get to select more spells, and then they come into your spellbook. So have a read through again. I feel that shield is always mage armor is a really good spell. I've never used it. I should do, because it just gives you more armor. Like, I wouldn't use. I don't know. Shield, I've used loads. This is a really good one. Grease is a good one. Fog Cloud, yep, that could be really good. Any of these, if you're want to be more utility, something like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, it knocks them prone. When a melee creature hits something prone, it's like it does. Like, I think it's advantage or it's a critical. I think it's advantage. I think if they're paralyzed, then they get critical. So better chance of doing more damage with this one. So it's always worth thinking about what it is that you want to be able to do and how you want to do it. This one would be pretty good. I've never used it. Yeah, so just go through, have a look, see how you think you want to play, and just select the spells. If you want to do a purely damage-based spellcaster, it might be worth looking at a different spellcaster. I find that wizards they're good. They do a lot of damage, but they are more utility-based casters, like bards. But having said that, don't think that you can't do a lot of damage with a wizard, because you bloody can. And some of their spells are utility, but also do damage. They're sick. Love wizards. So let's have a look at. Let's clear this out. So how would I build a wizard? Guess what? Primary ability. Guess what this is going to? 17. Also, observe this. We only had 1 here earlier, and now we've got 3. So I'm also going to put Dex up to 10, which has also given us another spell slot. Oh no, I think this was just slow actually. I was like, that shouldn't have made a difference. We've now got 4 prepared, but that's because of our intelligence. What point does that? There you go. So when it was on 15, it was 3. Now it's 4. Obviously, it just took a second. Constitution is something we probably want to put higher. As long as this is 17, and don't worry about strength, you're not strength. I think you can probably go anyway, really. Wisdom's quite a good one. Might be good to be high. Thing. That might be a decent build. What we're looking here. So this is maybe give us some extra health there. 30. Let's do. Take that up to 14. Or maybe we put charisma up to 14. So we could do lots of chatty. Or maybe if we want to have more defense, we can go 14 here. So the last couple of points, I'm because of how I know the game plays, I'm probably more likely to stack charisma. But that's not to say that you can't use those last 2 points anywhere. Let's have a look at our skills. So we know that we have, based off our race, +7 to our history. So I don't want to have background that gives us history. Insight and persuasion, probably okay. No, we don't want that. What's it? Insight and religion might be a good one. What does that now give us? So we've got a +5 on Arcana, +7 on history, +5 on investigation, nature's +3, +5 on religion, +3 on insight. I quite like that. That's a really good rounded skill set. Not a lot of negatives there at all, is there? There's only 1. -1 on athletics. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good stat. That's pretty good. I might keep this guy. We might play this wizard. But yeah, so there you go. So I reckon this is how I would play this wizard. Don't know what school of magic I would go down later. As I said, there's a subclass that you get later on as you level up. Yeah, and then again, it's all how do you want to play your gnome. So that's all customization. That's not stuff we need to chat about. I really hope you appreciated this video. I hope it helped you in some way, shape or form. Even if it helped you with D&D, like, brilliant, good. We always need more D&D players in the world. If you want more content around this, and make sure to ask any questions in the comments below. I want to do a few videos on Baldur's Gate. One of those is do the most powerful characters in D&D translate to Baldur's Gate. Hopefully they do, in which case we're gonna fucking have a look and see if we can do it, because that includes sometimes multi-classing and stuff, but that's a different video. If there's any topics that you want to know, if you get to a point about the game and you want to know, then feel free to jump in my Discord. There'll be a link in the description, and feel free to ask questions in there. There's also a free Arc server for people to play if they want to do that. Yeah, by all means, there you go. Thank you very much. Please like, comment and subscribe, share it with your friends, and I will see you in the next video.